Hello, Cam followers. It is a Thursday evening, and this is your Facebook Live. I'm Hannah. This is Evie, and we're really lucky to be joined by Dr. Jeffery Powers tonight to talk about using CBD, which is a massive topic. It's going to be tricky in places to follow because the legalities and the regulations, etc., are becoming quite complex. But we're hoping that we're going to be able to clarify some things for you. Before I let the amazing Dr. Jeffery Powers introduce himself, I would like to say thank you to our sponsor, Big Barker, who have been amazing for us for the last year, supporting our work. We're really, really grateful for them giving us funds to help you guys. Now, Big Barker have actually put their bed through a clinical trial. It was a pilot study done at the University of Pennsylvania, and it did show to have great impact on mobility, quality of life, mood, demeanor, and perceived pain states. So it is really worth investing in a good quality dog bed. Thank you, Big Barker. Right, Dr. Jeffery Powers, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a veterinary practitioner. I've been in practice for almost 43 years now. Started out predominantly dairy practice. I mean, I was probably inspired to be a veterinarian by reading James Herriot's books. And I was lucky for a lot of years in the early 80s to practice in a very similar manner until a lot of the farms went out or moved on or moved to be huge. But since then, I predominantly over the years have done gradually increased my small animal practice to now the fact I'm predominantly almost all exclusively small animal and do a little bit of the other species still just to keep my fingers in it a little. So I got interested in hemp and cannabis probably about a decade ago when it was first coming on the market in the U.S. Hearing about it from people that wanted to try it or were trying it a little bit with some effect. It sort of boomed 4 or 5, 6 years ago. I was involved in the time on the AVMA Council on Biologics and Therapeutics, and I brought it forward as a future topic, and they said, yes, that's a great topic. You're the chairman of our cannabis working group. So then I proceeded that I had a real steep learning curve, which I'm still on. So because we're not taught anything in colleges or up until a few years ago, there wasn't a lot of CE. It's a lot of self-research on cannabis, both combining everything I could read, research that I could see in the human and veterinary field, and then working with clients. And to be honest, I'm a big believer in CBD because I found for me, it's allowed me to take much lower levels of painkillers such as ibuprofen. I got a horse tore my right shoulder about 25 years ago, and then the left one got torn by, I think, a cow. And so, it just helps with that chronic, just takes the edge off my pain. So anyway, I got more involved in it, and since a member of a veterinary cannabis society, I'm on their advocacy committee to stay active with some really, it's very good to stay in touch with the leaders in the veterinary community all over the world in that group. And I'm also, because I was curious about learning about it, I actually started growing hemp and actually produce a small amount myself and make tinctures and extracts for human and animal use. I've actually learned a lot about the different strains and how strains will vary one year to the next, just because of growing conditions and how it'll affect your products. That's a discussion for another day. I also do consult for Green Gruff as their veterinary advisor. That's a Canadian company that has a variety of chews and tinctures for pets.
Right, perfect, good. I'm glad that you got it out there so everybody knows what you're up to. We made a decision, the three of us, that we were going to deal with the legality regulations first, because we want to kind of make it really clear how complicated this area is. and that we're not doing this as a Facebook Live to say, hey, everybody, go and put your dog on CBD. That's not the plan. The plan is we're trying to help people navigate a very confusing area, because not only does the information and the regulations change from country to country, state to state. So we're going to start off with the UK synopsis. Then I'm going to bounce to you to just have a quick review about the US, so that people know that this is not an endorsement Facebook Live. This is a discussion about what we know, so that you can make the right decision with the help of your veterinarian. So over here in the UK, I think it was around 2018, CBD went from being a supplement, a nutraceutical type product, to being a recognized medicinal product. And that means that it needs to be treated and prescribed like a medicinal product. But unfortunately, in that transfer of recognition, no marketing authorized product exists. So there is no veterinary CBD product in the UK that's got marketing authorization to be used as a medication, which leaves us in a no man's land, because we have to prescribe it, but we have nothing to prescribe. And also, it means that we are very restricted by the prescribing cascade. Now, we here in the UK, as veterinary professionals, have to follow recognised veterinary practice first. So we need to use products that have got strong clinical evidence. And only having exhausted all of those pathways are we then able to say, well, we could try this. And when we get to that point, if we do get to that point, then we look at using a human supplement, because we're allowed to go into the human sector. And what we have to do is try and find one that's got well-regulated, clinically approved, what I'm trying to say, independent certificates of analysis, etc. So it's quite a rocky road to get there, and you'll find that your vets aren't going to be comfortable to just recommend it. That's just not going to happen in the UK. It's been used more by chronic pain practitioners, having explored many other avenues and then falling into CBD. If over the next few years, we collect more evidence and it goes up the chain of the evidence, and it might find itself being recommended earlier, but we're in a bit of a swamp at the moment. What about you over where you are?
We're in a swamp as well, perhaps up on the edge of the swamp a little. So we have several things. First of all, federally, we're in a similar situation where the only federally FDA approved form of cannabidiol products that are available are the drug Epidiolex, that is manufactured, is a pure form of CBD, and it is manufactured for epilepsy and some certain types of seizures in children. Beyond that, because of the Farm Bill that passed in 2018, hemp products became legal. So several states have started to take action to at least bring the veterinarian into the discussion, because the problem is there's just a myriad of products out there of all kinds of strengths, potency, purity that consumers have access to. And also because of legalization of marijuana, there's a lot of products that are available perhaps in dispensaries that could be very harmful to pets. So it's really important that veterinarians become educated. And some states like Michigan passed a law a couple of years ago that allows veterinarians to discuss hemp products and marijuana products with their clients. They can't prescribe them, they can't recommend them, they can discuss them. It was pretty much just an open-ended type law. Two other states since then have passed laws that allow veterinarians to actually recommend hemp products. Those are Nevada was the first, California, they're still working on revisions of their law, but they allow veterinarians to recommend hemp and cannabis products to their clients for their pets. There's several other states are working on similar legislation, and then there's most of the states, probably 40 some states, have no laws or actually have some laws that may prohibit the use or discussion of CBD. So the movement is more states are opening up veterinarians to be where they need to be. I mean, people need guidance in this area. There are some potential benefits, but there's a lot of risks that need to be sidestepped. And so that's what we're working towards is so we can be the resource in this health treatment area, just like we are in so many other areas.
Yeah, definitely. So just to recap for complete clarity, this Facebook Live is not recommending, endorsing, promoting. We're just trying to distill some facts for you, because most people get their information online now, which is completely not regulated, and you will be able to read anything you like. So we're trying to keep as much to what we know, fact-based. Shall we quickly talk about the hemp marijuana divide, clarify so people know what we're talking about? Can you talk through the terminology so people understand?
So the cannabis plant, when it's grown, there's several varieties of it. You hear about sativa and indica, but for our practical purposes, we want to talk about strains that are like marijuana strains that have higher levels of THC. That's predominantly what's grown for use in human use for cannabis, for all sorts of things. Then there's the strains that are definitely of interest to people as well as animals, the non-psychotropic strains that are very high in cannabidiol or CBD and very low, less than 0.2 or 0.3 of THC in those plants. The plants, you can't tell them apart often looking at them. It's really the enzymes that change the root cannabinoid CBGA to either THC, CBD, or other cannabinoids that really determine what you're working with. So those are the two basic types that we deal with.
Right. So you something that always confuses me, because hemp is also non-medicinal and can be used in lots of non-medicinal ways, can't it? You hemp-based creams and hemp-based paper and hemp-based, it gets quite confusing, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, hemp seed oil, like if you just if you're growing it for flower, you want to avoid having the males around. If you're growing it for seed, you want the male and female plants to breed and just fill up with seeds. And the hemp seed oil is, I think, considered one of the healthiest oils that are out there. And that's the seed oil from the seeds once they're gone to full maturity. Now, the one thing about those is there's negligible amounts of any cannabinoids. That's all lost in the seed finishing process. And then hemp is also grown, different strains are grown for fiber to make all sorts of clothing, garment wear, ropes. So there's really...
So that's where it can get really confusing, because you can have like medicinal focused hemp and more kind of like industrial hemp, but they all get called hemp.
Yeah, in fact, they all get called industrial hemp too. So.
Yeah, so I have owners that come in and they've been buying a supplement hemp oil for their dog, and you're like, nah, there's no medicinal benefit to this.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, can you talk about different parts of the plant as well? Because just to clarify, some people will buy, as you see, hemp seed rather than, say, hemp leaf. And again, that's got different quotients of medicinal product, haven't they?
Yeah, well, like if you're growing hemp for the purpose of developing and maintaining or collecting cannabinoids, you want predominantly or sterile female flowers that were never germinated in any way. And then what happens is you get these leaves and flowers that are full of small pods. They're really pretty cool. Small pods on these flowers that are loaded with the cannabinoids. So now, like I was saying, that if those flowers were pollinated, then you'll end up with a bunch of seeds. Which, if we're growing hemp for flower, we're like I say, we're making sure. Usually, we're treating the seeds as they're growing, as the plants are being germinated. We actually do a process of feminization to create a part of the plant that actually produces sperm to pollinate, and so we'll get both X and X coming from the male flower into the female flower. So it's a pretty interesting process. If you don't do that, and like I say, the males around, then you just got a hodgepodge of about 50% of each male and female seeds, and there's no way to know a lot of times until the plant is several months old.
Wow. I'm a bit blown away. I think I need to go and read a little bit about this, mixing up the sex types of the cannabis plant. Okay, so we're beginning to start paving a way that people understand that there is a lot of ability to confuse the consumer already. You know, we've got different species, different strains, different parts, and they can all get marketed as hemp-based products. And hemp is strongly linked because there's always going to be a picture of a cannabis leaf. Always. So people will go to a health food shop and they'll buy a hemp-based oil or spray. And it's very difficult to know whether it's got any medicinal value. So what are people supposed to look for?
Well, like if you, in that case, the keyword is hemp seed oil. If it says hemp seed oil, it's like I say, it's that oil that's collected from the fully mature seed that has no cannabinoids in it. Mm-hmm. So any product, however, that contains cannabinoids should have, although it's still not completely regulated, and this is where really the government could step in and say, okay, let's figure this out. Let's make sure everybody has a good certificate of analysis. These labs are regulated, but anyway, it should have a certificate of analysis or a link to it, or in the label at the very minimum that has some description of how much of the various cannabinoids are in there. And so like a hemp-based product, you would want to know right away that it has how many milligrams it has of CBD. I mean, I have one, you can't see it here, but this one has 1,050 milligrams of CBD in a 1 ounce bottle or a 30 ml bottle. Mm-hmm. And it has right on it the breakdown of CBD, CBDA, CBC, and THC, and then it has a scanning barcode. So the consumer or the veterinarian can scan and go right to the certificate of analysis. And again, that's another thing people need to learn is how to read a certificate of analysis.
Yes, yeah. Because I've always been of the skeptical mindset. Anybody could fudge one.
Exactly. And that has been an issue. I think things are getting better than they were, but there's recent studies that show the same sample was sent to multiple labs and got different results.
Which it just adds another layer to this feeling of slightly lost. Who do you trust?
Yeah. The one thing and I don't know with the UK, but in Michigan you have, in the United States you have like a hemp industry authority. So the industry itself is trying to set some standards and credentials for these companies, having accurate testing is very important. I know even in my little company, the good thing is we can't advertise products or list products in any way unless they have gone through a series, and legally we have to prove how much of the cannabinoids are in the product. So there's several steps. So anyone doing this is going to test the concentrated extract they get from the plants. And the other thing that's critical is, because hemp is an accumulator, you want to make sure that the testing shows whether or not there's heavy metals or other organophosphates or things in them. I know there was a study done in Europe about 5 years ago, and they found a lot of chlorinated hydrocarbons in some of the samples.
Yeah. And that was really highly publicized, because suddenly hemp-based products became very popular overnight, and there were shops popping up everywhere saying face creams, milkshakes, you name it, it's got hemp in it. And you can just imagine there are a lot of people that see that as an opportunity to start making some dollar and setting up their own hemp farms. And as you've said, the plants are very good at dredging a lot of stuff out of the soil, aren't they?
Yeah.
And also the way that a lot of people were actually extracting the oil was involving other things being introduced which would be considerably toxic. So that was a massive problem, wasn't it?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. So we've now made everybody miserable. So sorry. But we're just being honest with you. And from my perspective, I'm hoping all the people that are listening are going, wow, that's quite hard for a vet who's got that dog in their care, that owner really believes that the vet's going to do the best they can. And I'm going to give her a product that she doesn't know what it is, where it's come from, you just wouldn't do it. You just wouldn't do it. Whereas medicinal products, you know what you're handling. It's very well regulated. So that's been a massive problem with vets being comfortable of even going into this arena. Should we do a couple of questions before we then start talking about like the medicinal clinical trials, and stuff? So this one,
just on that last point, I just wanted to say, I think that, most of the hemp extracts really are almost considered like a herbal supplement. It's more because the plants do change, unless you're dealing with like an isolate, which there are products, I think, that are in your market now that are isolates of CBD, which is good in that you know exactly what's there. The only thing is, most of the studies and most of the meta studies that have been done show a lot of times that the extracts actually are better because of the blend of cannabinoids and terpenes.
Exactly. Okay, let's add the next layer of confusion. Just explain that again, because as you say, we went through a phase of believing that CBD was going to be the most medicinally beneficial, and we started isolating down a huge spectrum of phytocannabinoids within these plants and isolating and going, we're just going to do CBD. And then there was more evidence saying, well, actually, we like all of them together. Explain, because there's full spectrum, single isolate, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, well, there's what's known as the entourage effect, where these compounds actually may be more beneficial in the natural extract of the plant as opposed to isolating, like you were saying, cannabidiol. The one thing they found with cannabidiol is as a pure extract, it tended to have more side effects. Some of them, I think, headaches, things like that in people, and so they seem to have a few more side effects in the profile, although they may be a little more consistent in the dosage. So like when we talk about the entourage effect, we may be saying that, so this hemp plant's got 1 part THC and it's got 35 plant parts CBD. Well, that tiny little bit of THC, because THC at sub therapeutic levels, that subpsychotropic levels, is actually a very good analgesic. It's a much better analgesic than CBD is. And so it may have a beneficial effect. Or some of the other minor cannabinoids, CBC is thought to have a good effect on the immune system and also the GI tract. So the thing is, we're learning so much so fast right now. So not only the cannabinoids, but a lot of full extracts will have terpenes in them, caryophyllene, linolene, pinene, that will in hundreds more, and they all have anti-inflammatory or sedating effects, things like that. So it's just it's like I say, it's like the herb of herbs, herbal medicine right now, and we're working to try to find the best parts of the plant, and research is showing that sometimes these isolates can be more focused, and maybe analogs of these who knows what it's going to be in another 10 to 20 years.
It's mental, isn't it? Just quickly explain to people, you touched upon cannabinoids, the terpenes, the flavonoids, is that right? There's actually different things. And I think so many people just think that a cannabis plant produces THC or CBD. That's it. That's how it is. And actually, is it 100 plus cannabinoids now? And then there's, as you say, all the flavonoids, the terpenes. It's like a really, really scary pick a mix.
Yeah, it's a very complex plant, and just like we briefly talked about, CBD and THC, but other important ones are CBN, which will kind of make you sleepy. And so actually, sometimes when people, they're enjoying some marijuana, and they get all sleepy, and they may think, "Wow, that was that THC," and actually, it might have been the CBN in that plant, or it might have been myrcene, which is the terpene that is also known as causing couch lock.
And couch lock.
Couch lock.
Don't have that.
And then so beta caryophyllene is a potent anti-inflammatory, and different extraction methods will yield higher levels of these terpenes.
Yeah.
And I had a discussion with a doctor just the other day about, he was adamant that the only good terpenes are the terpenes that are in that plant, and that he believes in, again, this entourage effect. He said you can't take, because limonene, you could get limonene from a lemon, but he said you wouldn't want to take that limonene that came from the lemon and mix it in with your hemp extract. It just wouldn't do the same as limonene from hemp. So
right. So, having completely blown people's marbles about the complexity of this, we will now drift smugly into what do we know about the clinical benefits. And this platform's all about chronic pain management, so we will focus attention here, but I do want you to just dance in the other arenas. Where I even read it was ages ago, I read a paper, it helps with public speaking. I was like, okay. So it's got a lot of clinical attributes that are being investigated, haven't they?
Yes, definitely. I think in the, that's interesting. Like you mentioned that one thing, because there's a lot of work in human medicine about anxiety in people, and how cannabidiol extracts at various levels seem to be beneficial in certain circumstances. Like I think there's 2 studies in the UK that have shown, one at 300 milligrams of cannabidiol, which is a healthy stiff dose, and one at 600 were both beneficial in public speaking, just by inducing calm. So now in veterinary medicine, there has not been a lot of success yet in finding and repeating those results. There's been 2 or 3 studies. some didn't show any benefit. One definitely showed the dogs were less aggressive in a kenneled situation. There was recently, actually, we talk about arthritis, but there's recently a TPLO study. I don't know if you saw that just came out. Actually, they use CBD post-operatively to see how it would do as far as affecting pain and gait movement, and also they even looked at bone healing. And unfortunately, in this study, it didn't really show a lot of benefit in those areas. However, it did show benefit in one area, because they asked the clients to keep their dogs somewhat sedate and not overdo it. And so they had the people in the study could get trazodone for their dogs if they needed it to calm their dogs. And although there was no difference in healing between the groups, the group that got CBD used much less and needed much less trazodone. Mm-hmm. So there was definitely, and I know they were interested in that finding, and they're going to try to elaborate on that.
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
I
am going to be cynical Susan now. Ready?
Okay. Yeah.
How big was the study?
I think it was like 40 some dogs altogether.
And when you do like a cross comparison to a human study where there's going to be like 1,000 people and it's going to be over 4 years, that sort of thing, I am just going to let the public know that the veterinary clinical studies, we do the best that we can, but they are always going to be small in number, potentially, not as clinically excellent as we would love them to be. So 40 is still quite a small study, but it's very, very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the issue. It's just the economics play its role, and it's a difficulty in recruiting cases that make it all fit into a study. And like a lot of the osteoarthritis studies only involve 20 to 30 dogs in most cases.
Yeah. And I think that was brought home to me loads when there was the human glucosamine studies, and they had like thousands of people in these studies, and they followed them like 6-10 years. And with all of that data, they went, I don't think it really helps. And you're like, whoa, we normally have 17 dogs for 28 days in a study. So it is always kind of difficult, and people need to just keep their wits about them. But because most people that are listening will want to know about the pain management side of CBD, I know you're going to be up on the papers. I got to the point of knowing that there was 6 published, and there was 1 pending.
Yeah, I think there's 7 or 8 now. And again, most of them show benefits in one way or another for increased movement or increased activity scores, although there are some that didn't. Some showed benefits of like lipophilic CBD at a very low dose, like 0.5 milligram per kilogram, up to most of the studies were running about 2 milligrams, 2.5 milligrams per kilogram of CBD twice daily. And so, but what I see, because I do work with a lot of people, I use it on my own dogs, and I work with a lot of people, and I think that it's one of those things that you do see benefits some of the time. A lot of the benefits that you see are subtle and involve just some of these factors we talked on. Maybe they're reducing the dog's anxiety a little, and maybe they're making some inflammation. I know some of the studies have definitely shown markers like in skin. They've shown that CBD in a couple studies has decreased the pruritus, although it doesn't like heal the wound. It doesn't like, you've got a big erythematous area that's all inflamed, and needs other medications, CBD may help to relieve the pruritus associated by its effect on the nerves, but it's not going to actually heal the lesion.
Yeah. I'm actually on call, so I'm going to have to go and take an emergency phone call. I can leave you with the lovely Evie, but I do think that you've just done a brilliant transition to talk about that general belief that it is there to bring back balance, homeostasis, and how the benefits. So I'm going to get you to talk about the endocannabinoid system and how we think it all fits together. I'll be back.
Okay. That's just like me. I have a doctor working for me today covering, so I won't have to get yanked away.
Oh, bless you. You're more prepared.
Yeah. Well, sometimes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we were talking briefly about cannabinoids and what in the body do cannabinoids interact with.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have in all our bodies that helps to monitor and helps to regulate the homeostasis of our bodies is the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is one of the largest networks in our body of G-coupled protein receptor systems that are throughout skin, they're throughout our GI tract, they're throughout our central nervous system and many of our organs, and they help to regulate homeostasis. There's two main types of receptors: the CB1 receptors that are predominantly central nervous system and in organs, and the CB2 receptors, which a lot of times will regulate immune function. And so these cannabis plants and these phytocannabinoids that we were talking about earlier, they have the ability to interact with the endocannabinoid system.
Okay.
And so that's one of the components of how, say, CBD has been thought to affect the endocannabinoid system is by direct interaction with the CB1 and CB2 receptors that have only been really discovered about 40 or 50 years ago. So a lot of this science is new, and that's because there was so much prohibition for so long. So cannabidiol also will interact with several other receptors, the serotonin receptor, the 5-HT1A receptor, the TRPV1 receptor, and a lot of these receptors, CBD will actually bind to partially or fully, and will affect anxiety and inflammation directly if it's in enough of a level to get there. And I think that's one thing we didn't talk about earlier is a lot of these tinctures, they only get absorbed very variably, about 15 to 25 or 30% of the CBD that is ingested orally by an animal or put in the animal's mouth or in a chew will actually get through, because it doesn't bypass the liver. It gets into the liver and gets metabolized. So the other thing, so as far as how CBD interacts with these receptors, the one thing it does do, so there's a lot of natural endocannabinoids that our body produces. Many of the most common are anandamide and 2-AG. And these compounds, like it's thought when you go have a bunch of exercise or go for a long jog and you get this high feeling, a lot of times that's that instant rush of anandamide in your body that's called the bliss molecule. And so that gives you that good feeling for a while. These cannabinoids also have the ability, by reducing and blocking postsynaptic nerves. So that's like the happy side of it. They also have, so you ever cut yourself, and right in the beginning there's this excruciating pain, and then even though you're bit by a dog or whatever, and scratched or clawed or whatever, and there's blood coming out, and at first it hurts a lot, and then it kind of, even though it still looks terrible, the pain kind of goes away.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of that is the endocannabinoids are actually interacting and blocking that postsynaptic.
Okay.
That pain nerve fires, and those endocannabinoids help to block that. So one thing CBD is, because it interacts with that CB1 receptor. So sometimes it may actually increase the endocannabinoid tone or the endocannabinoids present in our bodies or our animals' bodies, because it's blocked that compound that was naturally produced from binding in that site and being degraded. So it just sort of sits there and isn't as degraded because it can't quite completely bind, but it still stimulates the receptor some. So cannabidiol, as far as those receptors, is kind of a indirect effect. Whereas THC just really likes those CB1 receptors, and THC just boom is in that CB1 receptor, and the person or the dog is feeling kind of spacey, and the thing is, the body doesn't have an enzyme that can break it down, so it has to slowly degrade. So that's why an anandamide may act, or 2-AG may act like THC in binding, but it's usually quickly dissipated, whereas the THC will sit there. THC does interact and also helps with pain tremendously, similar to what those natural endocannabinoids do. So we were talking about endocannabinoids and how THC and CBD interact and bond to those.
Yeah. So did you talk about how many people will kind of explain that it brings the body back into balance because it's affecting the immune system, it's affecting sleep, it's affecting, as you say, anxiety, pain management. It's quite incredible. And that the system was only found like 10, 20 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, they're still finding out more and more about the endocannabinoid system. Yeah, we talked about how it's involved in balance and homeostasis. And it's really one of the largest networks and systems throughout our body. And we unfortunately we're still learning more about it. And it's fascinating where it can be in the gut and really everywhere, and everything larger than a hydra. Every animal in the animal kingdom has an endocannabinoid system.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating, and I think it's going to be really exciting over the next, decade as we learn more about it. And dare I say, the hype and the excitement and the money makers bugger off, and we actually start doing some, quality, reliable products. But for me, sounds really skeptical, but there's been so many people cashing in on the bandwagon. I think there's been a lot of really crap out there.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think it's like in the United States. I mean, there are reputable places that hemp is grown, but I think so much of the hemp products, especially like you get it at the gas station or whatever, a lot of these products are isolates that came in maybe from China or from other countries. And with not meeting the standards that are being developed like by our agriculture, and I'm sure hopefully yours as well.
Yeah, no,
Europe
absolutely.
actually, I think THC wise, wants the plants to have a lower level than they do in the U.S.
Oh, really?
I think it's like 0.2 versus 0.3 here.
Yeah, no, I think that is true actually.
And granted, it may be going up some. I know there are a few countries in Scandinavian countries, I think, that will allow up to 1% THC in the plants, which may not be a bad thing as long as someone's not ingesting too much.
Can I just ask, did you cover about tinctures and titrating and the way that it's commonly marketed by many companies? So just from my experience, I've had people come in that have bought products. They've actually got ones that have got a certificate of analysis, and they're just doing it in a dropper fashion, and they're just increasing the drops every couple of days, increase it up again until they believe that they've got a clinical benefit, which is really That's wild. You know, when you kind of go, God, I don't know how to help you with that. So I've ended up calculating what the dose that they are giving in their dropper fashion at 20 drops per mil, percentage of the mil. That means that you're giving about this much, which actually, when you look at the weight of your dog, it's about 0.1 mg per kg, which is far from the clinical trial dose of 1 to 2 mg per kg twice a day. And I sit there just going, I don't really know what to do with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one way we can help people in the beginning, because so many times they'll buy something and they don't know. And like these bottles are usually, the standard is they'll label how much is in the whole bottle. And we're used to medicines saying how much is in the pill or how much is in the dose. So we have to do that calculation, just like you said, and to determine where they're at, as opposed to if they want to try for these effects that may be that have been shown in these limited studies. They're a long ways from that. The one problem is these extracts and products. They're not really cheap, so it's not a matter. It gets to be getting, say you're treating a 40-kilo dog with the proper dose. It can be pretty pricey and exclude a lot of people from being able to afford to use those products. However, I will say, as in people, we talked about the 300 to 600 milligrams and the speaking studies and all that. And a lot of times the dose for children for seizures is between 2 and 8 or 9 milligrams per kilogram for a Epidiolex. There's a lot of times that people report, and I mean, I survey customers that I know have used these products to try to get a satisfaction or find out whether they feel they work. But sometimes it will work at much lower doses, closer to like a milligram per kilogram. It provides
still higher. That's still higher than what.
That's still high, yeah, and sometimes even lower. But anyway.
Sorry to butt in, but I do find that, especially a few years ago, as you say, people who had like a 40-kilo dog and they'd bought a 1% tincture and they were given 2 drops on the tongue once a day. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But they saw it as good value because the bottle may have been 30, 40 quid, but it was going to last them, 3 weeks. But actually, if they used it according to a clinical dose, it would last them 2 days.
Right. And that's definitely an issue. And that's where I think a lot more work needs to be done. There was just a study done in Italy on osteoarthritis that was kind of interesting, that they were on dogs that were getting multimodal therapy. They were getting Feroxib. I'm trying to remember. Feroxib. Yeah, they were getting that. They were getting gabapentin and some amitriptyline. And then, so some of the one group of dogs, again, it was like a 50-dog study, but one group got CBD at 2 milligrams per kilogram in it as a supplemental therapy. And what they found is they were able to reduce the NSAID to half or less and get the same benefits. So
I've read that study, and I quite liked it because it was actually a glimpse of reality of what vet practice here in the UK would be like. Because the dogs, go back to the beginning, the dogs that we see will be on multiple medications, and then you would be allowed, having explored all avenues, to use CBD. So that paper was really relevant to us.
Yeah, exactly. Because we, I see these dogs, and that's the one time I've definitely seen cases where the benefited was, you get these dogs that have all kinds of GI issues on non-steroidals, and the people, they're going to try something, and a lot of them have tried CBD or I've helped discuss it with them about CBD when they brought that up as something they were interested in. And there's a lot of those cases, those geriatric dogs that do have some anxiety and some low-grade arthritis in a variety of their joints. That's what I see as kind of the target animal that often receives the best benefits from these hemp products.
Yeah, I was talking to, well, I talked to everybody about pain management, but I liked the way that somebody described that they felt it really had a place when you could see that the dog was systemically exhausted, so they were just depleted of, using their survival mechanisms. They'd been in pain for so long. I kind of thought, that makes a lot of sense, bringing back to balance. I'm just looking at the time. Do you want to go through the questions?
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions. Let's go up a minute.
Loads. Yeah.
So we've got a question from Rachel. I would suggest if using CBD, be careful if the animal is having surgery. I've had a patient crash under GA that had been given CBD at home and the vet wasn't made aware of this, so we used a normal pre-med. There must have been a reaction overdose of opioids.
What's your thought on that? That's obviously an N=1 study. It's not certain that the CBD played a role in the crash, but have you experienced anything like that?
I have not, but I don't think that I recall any cases that I was aware of, like that I had surgeries that I was doing that they were on that medication previously.
See, because I had a reaction in my dog, and I'm quite open talking about it. My dog was already on thyrocoxib. She was having paracetamol, and I will admit she had 2/3 of her liver removed because of a hepatocellular carcinoma. And I added CBD, and initially I was like, "Whoa, this is nice!" And then she started doing the little twitches, and I was like, "Wait a minute!" And luckily for me, I just stopped all meds, and the twitches and the tremors stopped. Mm-hmm. And I introduced, in a recognized veterinary practice way, back the Previcox, the paracetamol, and left off the CBD, and she didn't go back to twitching. But that was an N=1 situation.
I have seen numerous, not a lot, but I've seen several cases where the dogs got extremely depressed and sleepy on not necessarily a very high dose. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. That reaction could have been a combination with something like that. The CBD was overly sedating to that pet. I mean, the one thing that these absorption studies we didn't talk a lot about, but like Colorado State did work, and work was done in Israel a long time ago, that dogs have great variability in how effective they absorb CBD. So perhaps this case absorbed it very well and had a higher dose that perhaps interacted with some of the anesthetics or something. It's hard to say.
Yeah. And what about the belief that it occupies the cytochrome P450, so it can affect the metabolism of other drugs? Because I wondered whether with my dog Holly, they're bringing in the CBD with her depleted liver capacity, I just interfered with her ability to process the other drugs that she was on.
I would think that could make sense, definitely, because it does interact with other drugs, especially, I know I've spoken to some other doctors about this with clotting and patients on anti-clotting medicine, and they said a lot of times the CBD would affect the levels for about 2 weeks, and then the body would self-regulate and get used to it. But so that's that same cytochrome P450 system, and like you say, if you have limited liver function to begin with, and CBD does pretty consistently raise alkaline phosphatase levels above baseline in many of these studies that have been out there. It's never thought to be to a real serious level, but perhaps with all these other factors, it can add up. So definitely that's one thing when people are using CBD on their pets, they need to make sure that their pets' liver functions are being managed.
Cool. Do you want to start at the bottom and whiz up?
Yeah.
Go for it. Start with the 4-hour one.
This one?
Yeah.
Do you agree with the need for a 4-hour gap between CBD and other medication?
I do know, as far as CBD getting absorbed, it does get absorbed better with fats. I haven't seen that particular evidence in a study of that gap. I think it's wise to space out any meds, but I could look into that further. But I don't know of anything off the top of my head. I know in most cases I've seen people space medicines, but not necessarily that far.
No. And that's the thing with CBD. There's a lot of anecdote out there, isn't there? And people that talk very convincingly about how to use it. And quite often I'm like, well, where did you get that? I've not ever read that. But crack on, love. Crack on.
And that's why it's even harder for veterinarians, because there's all these people out there that will give all kinds of advice. Like I say, I'm running into this where they're using the high THC oil and think they're giving hemp oil. It's just like it's the latest trend I've seen last month. And the guy at the bud tender will gladly tell them anything.
Mm.
And we're all still a little bit hamstrung in what we can do.
Definitely.
Why does it matter that we can lower NSAIDs if even the CBD goes through the liver? What is the benefit?
Well, the CBD has been determined by the World Health Organization, is a very safe product as long as we know it's pure and or the purity of it, and the fact that it lacks other toxins. And so it has mild inflammation inducing properties on the liver. They're always usually transient. And so by getting to a lower dose of an NSAID, we could potentiate the same amount of pain relief or anti-inflammatory properties without some of the other side effects, say, the NSAID may have on kidneys or GI tract, things like that.
Yeah, I think people need to know that they're completely different products. And I think the non-steroidals get kind of lumped into the fact that they hurt the kidney and liver. And in fact, hepatotoxicity in the non-steroidals is actually pretty rare. But non-steroidals will affect the prostaglandins, which will affect the GI mucosa potentially. I think would be a greater reason. That's more common, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. That's what you usually see is GI, either vomiting or inappetence, or in unmanaged cases you can get bleeding ulcers.
Yeah.
Has any testing for efficacy been tried on felines?
Yeah, there are studies on felines. There's studies ongoing. There's been studies on dermatitis and allergic dermatitis in cats. There's been a lot of pharmacokinetic studies on cats as well. One thing, cats metabolize CBD faster than dogs do. So to treat your cat with CBD is probably a 3 times a day undertaking. And I have 2 cats, and I've tried them on, how it is to feed a cat and get a cat to eat a treat when you want the cat to eat the treat, or to give a cat a tincture. It's a complex problem in getting a lot of cats treated. I do know people that do it, and definitely it shows a lot of the similar properties by affecting and balancing the endocannabinoid system, but we definitely need more work and more palatable forms.
Perfect.
Are there any contraindications in regards to medication or conditions when you wouldn't use CBD?
So we talked a little bit ago about the cytochrome P450 system. There are numerous anti-epileptics that we commonly use that could interact with that system, so it could delay metabolism of medications, which could in fact lead to more potential toxicity by not allowing those medications to be metabolized. There's like THC has been known to reduce interocular pressure. There's concern that CBD could actually increase interocular pressure. So glaucoma patients, you wouldn't want to use CBD on. Those would be the main things. There's certain classes of drugs in that area as well.
Yeah, that's a really key point, is that a lot of the sales around the CBD based products don't talk about contraindications at all, do they? It's this wonder drug. It's going to do everything. And we are beginning to understand there's certain occasions that we wouldn't want to use it. And as you said,
I think if we just get by all the confusion and legal and get more research, and then we'd find the niche where endocannabinoids the endocannabinoid system, or these plant cannabinoids can really work, or maybe it'll be a second generation of them that's determined, but more research will get us there.
What about there was one about dementia, cognitive dysfunction. Is there any studies supporting its use in that? A very difficult condition to treat. Yeah,
very difficult. So to my knowledge, there has not been studies in dogs yet. However, there are recently some pretty promising studies in people that have shown cannabidiol can increase brain function. And there was one recent study, I could send it to you, that CBD was found to reduce anxiety or in dementia patients by helping to calm them. So I guess those give us a glimpse that it may be beneficial in potentially in canine cognitive dysfunction. Anecdotally, I've seen both. I've seen one time where a client was giving it to a dog because they were concerned that it might help its dementia. It actually made it so sedate that it didn't work. And then there's been other cases where they felt it helped with night wandering, but it may definitely have potential. These human studies gives us some hope. I mean, it's going to be hard to get enough dogs, I think, to do a study like that.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to get all these osteoarthritis dogs, and they're all over.
Yeah, no, and as you say, dementia is such a vague kind of symptom. There was a good one about using it as and when. So somebody's talking about using it for anti-anxiety, for car journeys and stuff. I've always been kind of led to believe it's kind of, a dosing that you do on a frequent basis to get effect. Can it be used short term?
Well, the one thing is, so we didn't talk a lot about pharmacokinetics, but a lot of times the blood level from ingestion of CBD in a dog or cat would be about 1 to 2 hours after ingestion. So it can work and help, but its peak blood level, where it can get down to those other receptors that actually have direct role in anxiety, it's going to have to be 1 hour to 2 hours. So you can't we're going for a ride, I'm going to give my dog a bunch of CBD and it's going to work. It's not going to work that fast.
Right.
It in studies that's shown that it has helped, it's usually within a couple hours. So 1 to 2 hours. So like ahead of a storm, or say, you're going to be going for a ride, you're going on a trip, give it long enough ahead of time. Couple
and
hours
also,
ahead of
just time. Being a UK veterinarian, there are also licensed products. And here in the UK, we have methadone, we have trazodone.
There's all these other products. Right.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do one more question, because we've been keeping you going for 1 hour and 4 minutes now. Pick a question.
Let's go to the top.
There was a good one about percentages.
Yeah, here. That's what I wanted to find. Here we go. What's also very confusing, some brands list strength as single or double. Some have milligrams and some have percentages. Can you suggest how to compare all of these, especially, for example, 2.5%/5% versus milligram? Thanks.
Oh, should we just spend another hour?
Yeah, that's confusing. But usually, I think, and you can correct me, but I usually go by 1% is usually 10 milligrams. So you can kind of multiply that 2.5% or 5% would be 25% or 50%. Or I'm sorry, 25 milligrams or 50 milligrams. So,
yeah.
But that's all part of this. That's difficult for, you have to do mental gymnastics a lot of times to calculate the right dose.
And if they were to say just milligrams and not milligrams per mil, that means total content in my head. So if it said 1,000 milligrams, I'd be like, right, the whole bottle.
That's the whole bottle. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people find that really confusing.
That's confusing because usually everything is labeled the other way by, 100 milligrams per ml. No, it's 1,000 milligrams in the whole bottle. And that's where, people get confused. They're like, well, I gave my big Labrador some of that from that 250 milligram bottle.
Yeah.
And it gave him almost nothing.
Yeah. Exactly. See, I'm going to actually do the last question because I'm greedy. Purity. Now, I really have no idea about the answer, but you get all these statements about purity, and I never really get my head around that, where they'll be like 95% pure, 1,000 milligram. And you're like, I don't know what that means. Does that mean I've got 950 milligrams in this whole? I don't understand.
I mean, that would, if it was pure CBD, I think it'd be a powder. Right. So that's where you got to really read the certificate of analysis and look those up, and everyone should to try to find it anytime they have any interaction regarding a CBD or a hemp product, to look at the certificate of analysis, because that you'll see statements about everything that's in there, how much oil is in there. And it's unfortunate at this point we have to do that because there's really not a standardization of how these products are labeled.
No, I agree. And I don't know if it's still true, but I can remember reading many years ago on a supplement bottle, the front-facing label could actually be quite misleading comparative to the ingredient list. And, these terms like pure and potent and stuff, they're not regulated at all.
No.
So you can have somebody go, it's pure CBD, and on the back you're like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So do you feel that we've covered enough? I know. My head feels like I've got a GDV in it. It's just twisting on itself. But thank you so much for giving us your time. I want everybody, all the 68 people that are still listening, to say thank you to Jeffery Powers for giving up his time and trying to clarify some of these confusions. Every person that comes on and does a Facebook Live does it out the kindness of their own heart. And I want people to realize this. This is an amazing achievement to get awesome souls like Jeffery to come and give his time for free, his expertise, the years he's been studying it. So I'm really, really grateful for you joining us tonight. And I hope you will come back to CAM again and keep us updated. Do you want to add anything?
I'm coming over there in April, so I'm coming to the UK. So,
well, you going to come to Cornwall?
All over.
Okay, we'll go out to drink some beer in an English pub.
There you go.
Now you're talking.
Well, I hope everyone enjoyed it. I know it's a lot of it's confusing, and I encourage you all to do as much research on your own as you can. It's kind of a unique area at this point in its knowledge base that it's really, we all have to kind of learn as much as we can ourselves.
Definitely. Thank you, dudes. We will see you all next week. Go join the member zone. So just to update you guys, all of these Facebook Lives are available free of charge when they're being out live. They're available for no more than a week afterwards. And then I'm afraid they now move into our member zone because we are self-funded. We are completely independent, and we do need to continue to fund ourselves with overhead spiraling as we create more and more things for you. Please go and join the member zone. It's £25 for the year. There's over 400 videos in there. There's downloads, resources, there's tools, there's booklets, there's courses, tea and chats with me once a month in a private Facebook group. It's really, really, really worth it. 25 quid for the whole year. So support Cam. I'll see you in there. See you later.
See you later.